to be doing. Perhaps God cares more about starving children and lack of clean water than some of the boundaries that we would want to create. So that's something I'm thinking about.
Do you have thoughts about inequality? Is equality an aspect of a good society? Is that important? How do you see the impact of inequality on the social order? Is that...
Yes, I think it's important. I think it's I would ground it in the biblical story as a Christian and see that as as God's vision of shalom for the world in terms of social relationships, equality of the genders, for example. So I do think that's part of God's vision. And the other part of your question?
What just aspects, sources of
disorder?
Yeah, or what's the impact of inequality on the social order?
Well, I think it creates marginalization of people and of groups, which ultimately reduces the ability for those people to experience shalom and peace and wholeness in their lives and relationships. So that might be the quick answer to that.
What are your thoughts on the sources of those inequalities, both for the poor and for the wealthy? Where does that come from? How can those people, both poor and wealthy, believe that they're living a good life? That good life we talked about? Is that?
Yeah.
How did they get in their positions of being poor or being wealthy?
Yeah, I think there's sort of some of those elements that are within our control, choices we make, and then I think a lot of them are environmental. The life you were given, and you can talk more about privilege or whatever at that point. But I think I think it's very complex. In other words, I would not say it's so simple. And I just see or talk to someone that has never met anyone that's really, really different than them, and you'll see that there's blinders there, and we all have them. So I think there is, just in terms of sources, I think there's a personal blinders that we all have, and that part of restoring that order or justice is to kind of remove those and be able to see clearly. And you can't do that without interaction and community and awareness. And then I think from there, then you can start to see, okay, well, and I talked about this earlier in my own life, those areas where I'm leaning into the good life, and those areas where maybe I'm not, whether by laziness or choice, or I don't even know, like, this goodness was available to me, and my blinders were up, I didn't even see it. And so I think that can be a part of it in terms of that, in terms of those relationships. So for the rich to be able to have their blinders removed and see the poor, to know their names, and then to be able to make adjustments as needed to move toward justice as they believe they should according to their conscience. And for the poor, I'm a person of privilege in many, many ways. So I even struggle to say what that would look like. I don't know that I can.
Are you still good? I got one last section here, and this is sort of left over from my original study of consumerism. But just your personal thoughts on things related to your own, personal experience of being a consumer in the culture, of things that have shaped your attitudes and feelings about shopping. Has there been any factors from your background or history or your story? Have you thought about, your shopping behavior and things at all? What are your thoughts on it?
Yes. I would say I grew up in an area with limited choices. I grew up in mostly a rural community, and so I think in a way it creates a situation where my family had to we had to stretch everything that we could, and you had to try to, because choices were limited, you did not have an unlimited opportunity for anything you wanted at any time. Definitely think that has shaped the way I shop and spend resources. I tend to be frugal in many cases. I think a couple factors have adjusted that are informed my habits as I've grown older. One was, moving to a new area and living in different places around the world. I think two, my faith and my education in that regard of the effects of my choices have certainly affected that too. So if I recognize that my purchasing this item has a consequence for someone else, it might cause me not to purchase it, or to find another way to support that marginalized community, or whatever. In terms of thinking in terms of fair trade and some of that, I find myself living in that in between so often. Of, gosh, I work for the church, so don't make a lot of money. You have to make it stretch. So you're finding, how can I get the things that we want or need, and yet also try to be a socially conscious consumer as I sit here with my iPhone.
Yeah, right.
And so...
Do you think there's any limits to how much we should spend? If so, what are those limits?
How much we should spend?
Well, how much we could buy or acquire?
Yeah, I think it's like my, as a parent, I think of my children, like one of those ice creams would be a good thing as a treat, maybe even splitting them for both of them. But to have one for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day would be destructive to their health, and it would not be a good thing. They'd be sick. So I do think there's such a thing as excess in terms of possessions and material. But I think I wouldn't necessarily put a dollar amount on it, because I know some of the greatest, most generous people, they actually bring in a whole lot of money, but they give a substantial amount of it away, and so they're generous in that way. And so I tend to think of it less as a little or a lot, and more probably in terms of what do you do with what you've been given, and did you come by it honestly? And that's, to me, a very important concern. But once you do receive or acquire that, what do you do with it? And do you spend those resources in ways that are wise? I guess that's the pastoral side of me, but then also ways that are redemptive, to kind of give it a bigger scope.
Has your shopping behavior or attitude towards it ever gone through a major transition, or has it always been pretty much the same all your life?
Well, certainly, transitions of job and vocation and location have affected all of that. When we were working in Switzerland and you came over to teach, we were living on nothing essentially. So everything was a specialty, because we'd given up so much to go volunteer and serve. So our shopping habits drastically changed, and that was both because of the environment. It was like second or third most expensive nation world to live, I think, at that time, and then also because of choice. We could have racked up tons of credit at that time in our lives. We didn't do it. We didn't want to. I think that was a good thing. So I'd say, apart from vocation, and kind of the vocational changes that may have affected spending habits, I'd say we've had moments or seasons in our lives where it's almost as if those sensitivities to those social awareness issues bubble up to the surface again, and it's almost like, okay, we're reminded of that. Oh, we got lazy in that area. We weren't socially conscious as maybe we have in the past. recalibrate